The brochure was still warm when she dropped it on my lap. Trifold. Glossy. Shelter name in bold blue. The front said, "A safe place to begin again." Inside, someone had circled check-in before 6 p.m. in red ink. Becca didn't say a word, just adjusted her necklace, grabbed her espresso, and walked upstairs like she hadn't just handed her husband a guided tour of rock bottom. I heard the suitcase wheels bumping down the stairs a minute later. Mine, not hers. 10 minutes before that, I was sitting across from Rick, her father, my boss, trying to make sense of the sentence that had just exited his mouth. "Letting you go, Curtis. It's not personal. Performance issues. Performance issues." I'd worked 18 months without a single vacation. I slept with my laptop next to the bed. I missed my own brother's wedding to cover a weekend breach on Rick's systems. But sure, performance issues. He didn't wait for a response. Just pressed a button and called in his assistant like I was a dry cleaning order. I stood up too fast and nearly knocked over his antique lamp. No one flinched. Then the drive home. Then the brochure. Then silence. Until I saw it, just before she closed the front door behind me. A silver key on the table. One I'd never seen before. Labeled with a tag. Guest loft. Not our loft. Not my key. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I tried to pull the car door closed and missed the handle twice. I sat there for almost an hour, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how my life had gone from stable to unrecognizable in under 30 minutes. The next morning, I got a call from my bank. My joint account had been drained. By 2 p.m., my phone plan was suspended. By 4 p.m., the company laptop locked me out. And by sundown, I was standing in line at a shelter with 2 bags and a hollow feeling in my chest that didn't have a name. She planned this. She planned all of this. But what Becca and her father didn't plan was what they'd lose. And how fast. I don't know why I didn't leave the city. Maybe because I didn't want to make it that easy for them. Or maybe because part of me hoped it was all just a sick test, some dramatic reset Becca orchestrated to teach me a lesson. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a lesson. It was a clean break. A cut so calculated it left no blood. The shelter wasn't what I expected. It was quieter, more structured. They gave me a bunk, 2 meal tickets, and a locker I barely filled. The guy above me snored like a diesel engine, but I was too numb to care. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, playing the past 6 months on loop. There were signs, of course. Late-night strategy calls with her marketing director. Weekend branding retreats that didn't allow +1s. I had asked questions, but gently. I never wanted to be that guy. Jealous. Paranoid. Controlling. Turns out, I wasn't any of those things. I was just stupid. By the 3rd day, I was walking aimlessly downtown with a half-dead phone and no idea what to do next. I'd applied to a few temp jobs, but my resume was locked behind the company portal I no longer had access to. Every time I reached out to a friend, I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, my wife kicked me out and gave me a brochure for the homeless. Got any leads? I was about to call my brother when I passed a wine bar just 2 blocks from our old apartment. That's when I saw it, Becca. She was sitting at a table near the window, laughing. She looked incredible. Same dress she wore on our 3rd anniversary. Her hands danced in the air as she spoke, and across from her, sipping a martini, was a man I'd never seen before. Well-dressed. Confident. Hands on the table like he belonged there. But that wasn't what made my stomach twist. It was the silver key. The same one I'd seen on the table that day. It was dangling from the man's finger, twirling slowly like a charm. I froze. She leaned across the table and whispered something into his ear that made him smirk. I took a step back. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I didn't go inside. I didn't bang on the window. I turned around and walked 3 blocks before my knees gave out behind a bus stop bench. Everything was rehearsed. The firing. The suitcase. The brochure. Even the damn key. They didn't just replace me, they erased me. Efficiently. Like a department getting shut down after budget cuts. I didn't cry. Not yet. I wanted to, but my body didn't have the energy for grief. The next morning, I finally got around to checking my old email. By some miracle, it hadn't been deactivated yet. I logged in from the public library downtown and scrolled through everything I'd ignored in my panic. That's when I found it. An email from Rick, sent 5 days before my review, with the subject, Proposal for Curtis's Exit, Draft 2. Draft 2. He'd been coordinating it with HR, CC'd Becca, even attached a sample severance script. There was a whole paragraph about minimizing personal impact during transition, and aligning the separation with Becca's personal goals. I felt sick. I clicked on the attachment and found bullet points, literal bullet points, on how to frame Curtis's departure as mutual. I didn't even get a script. I got a napkin. I wanted to forward it to someone, to anyone. But instead, I just sat there, my hands trembling, as a library timer counted down my last 3 minutes on the computer. That night, I finally broke down in the shelter shower. I cried so hard I forgot where I was. I didn't care who heard. I wasn't just unemployed. I wasn't just dumped. I was deleted. But here's the thing about people like Becca and Rick. They're too confident, too precise. They believe they can control every variable. What they forgot was me. And the one thing I still had that they couldn't track, log, or erase. The truth. And it was already unraveling. The next few days blurred. I barely spoke to anyone at the shelter. I barely ate. I stopped checking my phone. What was the point? I didn't exist to the people I used to call family. Not really. I was a loose end they trimmed with a smile. Becca and Rick hadn't just cut me off. They'd made sure I had no handhold left to climb back up. No job, no home, no accounts, no dignity. But they made one mistake. They moved too fast. And fast leaves fingerprints. On the 5th morning, while pouring powdered coffee into a chipped mug, one of the volunteers handed me a manila envelope. "This came in for you earlier," he said. "Dropped off by a courier." Weird, huh? I didn't even answer him. Just stared at the envelope. No return address. No name. Just my full name, handwritten in thick black ink. I opened it right there in the hallway, standing between peeling paint and buzzing fluorescents. Inside was a single Polaroid. Becca, sitting at a patio cafe I didn't recognize, leaning across the table toward that same man from the wine bar. But this time, she wasn't whispering. She was laughing. And she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. She was holding his hand. Publicly. Openly. Like she was free. Taped to the back of the photo was a note written in sharp, jagged handwriting. "You deserved better than this." No signature. No explanation. I read it 10 times. The handwriting didn't belong to anyone I knew. The Polaroid had a date printed on the bottom corner, taken 2 weeks before I was fired. Before the napkin. Before the performance issues. That was when something snapped in me. Not anger. Not vengeance. Just clarity. They'd been plotting this longer than I wanted to believe. And someone out there knew. I left the shelter and went to the only place I thought might give me answers, the building where Becca's design agency was headquartered. I knew she was still working there because her face was on a massive window decal promoting a new campaign. Be bold. Be unapologetic. I wanted to laugh. Or vomit. Or both. I waited outside the building, pretending to talk on my phone, until I saw someone I recognized, Alec, her old assistant. Nervous, awkward, always sweating through his dress shirts. But kind. He used to call me Mr. C like I was his high school teacher or something. He didn't notice me until I waved. He flinched like he'd seen a ghost. "Oh wow, Curtis, man. I didn't expect." "Hey," I said quietly, "can we talk?" He glanced at the tinted doors behind him and swallowed hard. "Yeah, not here." We ended up sitting on a planter down the block, next to a nail salon that reeked of acetone and lavender. I didn't waste time. "Alec, I just need to know one thing. That guy she's with, the one with the martini and the key, who is he?" Alec shifted uncomfortably. I don't think I should have. Please. I'm not trying to cause anything. I just need to know if anything I lived was real." He hesitated, then looked at his shoes. "His name's Damien. He's the investor Rick brought in 6 months ago. Private money. Big promises. No board oversight." Becca started leading the campaign to rebrand the company when he came in. They got close. Fast. My throat dried up. Close? Alec looked me in the eye for the first time. "She's been staying at his place since before the review, Curtis." I stared at him, but I wasn't even seeing Alec anymore. I was watching Becca pour me coffee 2 months ago, saying she'd be gone late for campaign research. I was remembering the scent of men's cologne that wasn't mine on her scarf. The expensive bottle of wine that showed up mysteriously on our porch. It all connected, and it all stung. But then Alec said something I didn't expect. "There's a reason people are nervous around Rick right now. Damien's not just an investor. He's buying them out. Quietly. Piece by piece." My head snapped toward him. "What?" "They're not calling it that yet, but everyone knows it. He's taking over. And Becca's helping him do it." I felt cold. Not angry, numb. She didn't just leave me. She replaced me with the man who was gutting her father's company. And Rick didn't even know. He'd handed me a napkin while his empire was being sold from under him. And that's when the sick part hit me. That key Becca left on the table? It was never for Damien. It was a message to me. A final insult. A reminder that I didn't even get to keep a door. But I had something now. A photo. A tip. And a reason to finally fight back. Because if Becca and Rick had built their new life on secrets, I was going to burn it down with the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't. There was something strange and stabilizing about knowing the full shape of the betrayal. It wasn't just random. It wasn't messy. It was choreographed. Every word Rick had said, every cold glance Becca gave me, every polite lie, it had all been practiced, scripted. And now I had the scene notes. I didn't want revenge. That's not what this is. I wanted reality back. Some version of it. Something that didn't leave me waking up in a cot wondering how I'd been evicted from my own life, like a squatter. The Polaroid was still folded in my coat pocket when I went to the one place Rick never thought I'd return to, his corporate headquarters. Not the one I used to work at, the downtown tower where the board met twice a month. I remembered the schedule. Fridays, 9:30 a.m. Closed sessions. Full suits. All files printed, not emailed. Rick always said, paper doesn't leak. I stood outside the glass revolving doors and watched execs pour in like clockwork. Then I spotted her. Dana, Rick's executive assistant. The only person in that building who ever treated me like a human being. She had a strict bun, wore navy everything, and carried a shoulder bag like it weighed more than her mortgage. I waited until she crossed the corner and caught her just before she reached the garage stairwell. Dana, I said. She froze like I'd triggered a motion sensor. Then she turned slowly. Curtis. I nodded. I'm not here to make a scene. I need one thing. Her jaw tightened. You shouldn't be here. I know. Please. Just listen. I pulled the Polaroid out and handed it to her. You know who that is, don't you? She looked at the photo. Her expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the edge just a little tighter. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I said. But you need to understand, Rick thinks he's in control. He's not. Becca and Damien, they're carving out his legacy behind his back. If I was disposable, so is he. Dana's eyes flicked back to mine. She didn't argue. She didn't scoff. She just said, you have 5 minutes. She led me down into the parking garage, into a side stairwell, and pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she handed it to me. It was an image, grainy but clear. A spreadsheet. Transaction records. Transfer logs. All under a shell LLC. All pointing to a buyout campaign that Damien had quietly started 3 months ago. Dozens of small investors pooling under a fake holding company. And guess whose name appeared in 2 of the listed beneficiaries? Rebecca Wexley. My legs almost gave out. I wasn't just replaced. I was walked off stage to make space for a hostile takeover. Dana took the phone back and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. I won't tell anyone you showed me this, I said. But I need a copy. I'll leave an envelope at the front desk tomorrow. No name. Just a blue paperclip on the corner. I nodded and turned to go, then paused. You've always been decent to me. Thank you. She didn't answer right away. Then, as I stepped through the stairwell door, she called out, for what it's worth. Rick was never afraid of losing the company. He was afraid of people finding out he never really built it. That hit harder than I expected, because it meant Rick hadn't just misjudged me, he'd misjudged her. The next morning, I picked up the envelope. Inside was everything I needed. The transaction trail, a timeline of meetings between Becca and Damien, and a contract draft proposing Damien take over as CEO under the condition that Rick retires quietly for health reasons. Health reasons. My God, I didn't know where to go with it, yet. But someone did. A name I hadn't thought about in years. Jillian Barnes. Investigative business journalist. She'd interviewed Rick 3 years ago after a big PR stunt. I remembered her because Becca hated her. Too nosy. Too self-righteous, she'd said. Which, in this case, made her perfect. I found her on LinkedIn. Sent one message. No details, just, I used to be Rick Wexley's son-in-law. I have something that will break your front page. Meet me, please. She replied in 20 minutes. I'm listening. And that was when I knew. They were about to hear me loud and clear. I met Jillian Barnes at a boutique coffee shop nestled between a failing bookstore and a yoga studio that smelled like lemongrass and debt. She looked exactly like I remembered her from Rick's magazine spread. Tight curls pulled into a bun, sharp blazer, eyes that had seen a lot and trusted very little. She walked in with a leather notepad and a pocket-sized recorder, nodded once, and said, "You've got 20 minutes. After that, I either walk out or we blow this wide open." I didn't waste time. I handed her the envelope Dana left me, the Polaroid, the bank logs I'd printed from the public library, and the confidential email thread I'd pulled before they shut down my company access. She went through them fast, faster than I expected. Her expression didn't flinch, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the contract draft. I didn't speak. I let the evidence breathe. Then she leaned back, folded her arms, and said, "You're not lying." "But why now?" I blinked. Because I didn't realize how deep it went until I had nothing left to lose. She nodded slowly. "You were collateral." "No, I was a test run," I said. They needed to see if they could erase someone quietly before they went after someone bigger. And Rick's the bigger one. Exactly. She sat there for a long time after that, staring out the window at nothing in particular. "You understand," she finally said. "If I run this, it could tank the Wexley name. That's not just business fallout. That's political, economic, even legal. Do you really want that?" And for the first time since I'd left my home with a brochure in my pocket, I knew the answer. No, I don't want revenge. I want the truth in a place where they can't hide it. She gave a slight nod, stood up, and said, "Give me 3 days." I didn't hear from her for 5. By the 6th, I'd convinced myself she bailed. That maybe Damien had found out. That Becca had used her agency's connections to kill the piece before it aired. I spent most of my time in the shelter, staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led me to this point like a slow-motion car crash. Then at 7:44 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, I got a message. "Meet me. Same place. Urgent." When I arrived, she looked different. Not polished. Not composed. Pissed. "Someone leaked it," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Leaked what?" "The story. A fragment of it. Half the data. Just enough to get headlines without proof. Now it looks like an ex-employee smear campaign." My stomach turned. "Who?" "Don't know. But it wasn't me." And now Rick's already responded. Called it fake. Claimed the documents were doctored. He went live with a video statement an hour ago. I pulled out my phone and searched. There he was, Rick Wexley in front of the company logo, sleeves rolled up, fake sincerity dripping from every syllable. "I love my daughter. I believe in my company. These accusations come from someone I once welcomed into our family. I wish him peace in whatever he's struggling through." I nearly threw the phone across the cafe. He turned it into a sob story? Jillian nodded. And it worked. At least for now. But we're not done. She handed me an old-school burner phone and a note. "You're going to make a few calls. We're going to talk to the people Damien paid off. The ones not on payroll anymore. The ones with NDAs they thought would keep them safe." I took the phone. "And what if none of them talk?" "They will," she said. "Because if he gets away with this, they're next." That night, I used a public phone charger station to power up the burner. I called the first number Jillian gave me, then the second, then the third. It was the fourth call that changed everything. A voice answered. Shaky. Nervous. Is this about Wexley?" I confirmed. I didn't push. The voice said, "I didn't want to be part of it. I told Becca I'd keep quiet, but I didn't know how bad it would get." I froze. "Wait, you worked with Becca?" Silence. Then, "I lived in the guest loft. I saw too much. That wasn't just a business deal. She was involved in everything. Even the transfers. Even the script for your firing." My blood ran cold. "I have emails," she whispered. "And voice recordings. She doesn't know I saved them." I nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't just about Rick anymore. Becca hadn't just betrayed me. She built the knife, sharpened it, and handed it to Damien herself. And now, someone else held the handle. Her name was Lacey, 23, freshly out of a marketing internship, and, according to her own words, desperate enough to say yes to anything. She was soft-spoken, jittery, and kept checking the street behind her like she was afraid someone had followed her. We met in a laundromat 2 neighborhoods over, neutral ground. She wore a hoodie pulled tight around her face and held a flash drive like it might explode in her hand. "Are you sure no one saw you come in?" she asked. I gave a slight laugh, more out of disbelief than humor. "No one's watching me. That's the point." She nodded, but her eyes were still scanning every angle of the tiled room. "I wasn't supposed to be there long," she said. Just a weekend stay. Becca said the guest loft was empty, and I could use the space while the agency was closed for a holiday shoot. She told me not to touch anything. What happened? I asked. I touched everything, she said, finally looking me in the eyes. I didn't mean to snoop. But the second night, I heard yelling downstairs. Her and Damien. Arguing. I recorded it because, well, it sounded off. Violent. Not like they were fighting. Like they were planning something. It was all code, but they kept saying the transfer and the script and even your name. She pulled out her phone and tapped a few times before sliding it across the table. I only recorded 20 seconds of it. I got scared. But that was enough. I put in the earbuds and pressed play. It was Becca's voice, unmistakably crisp and firm. He'll go quietly. He always does. He won't question anything. Just stick to the wording. Use the part about burnout that gets sympathy. Then Damien. And if he doesn't? Becca laughed. Then he'll walk out with his little dignity and a shelter brochure. That's all he has. I froze. Every muscle in my body went tight. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just deceit. It was mockery. They enjoyed it. I tried to forget it, Lacey said. But the day after, they moved me out suddenly. Said the space was being repurposed. Then Rick himself showed up at my building the next week. Told me to stay silent or I'd never work again in the city. You have proof. She nodded and handed over the flash drive. Emails. Screenshots. 2 signed NDAs. 1 from Becca. 1 from Rick. And a payment trail from Damien's account. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They threatened a 23-year-old intern to protect a smear campaign against a man who never even raised his voice during their 7-year marriage. And it would have worked if Lacey hadn't gotten scared enough to save everything. I took the flash drive, carefully slid it into a padded envelope I'd brought with me, and said, "You're not alone anymore." She gave a half smile. "I know. You're going to bury them, right?" "No," I said. "I'm going to let them bury themselves. I'll just hand them the shovel." I left the laundromat with more evidence than I knew what to do with. Jillian was going to need time, maybe even legal cover. But we had enough now to make the entire story undeniable. That night, while sitting on a bench outside the shelter under flickering streetlights, I watched a robin struggle with a plastic wrapper it thought was food. It hit me. People like Becca and Rick, they didn't just lie to get ahead. They rebranded cruelty as progress. They packaged betrayal like a promotion. And I'd bought it, like everyone else. I powered up the burner phone and called Jillian. She didn't say hello. Just, "You have something?" "I have the voice of your next headline," I said. "And the girl they tried to erase." She met me that night. Took the drive. Listened to the audio right there in her car, mouth tightening with every second. She didn't speak until it ended. "I'll have this ready in 48 hours. Once it goes live, there's no walking it back. You sure you're ready?" "I was never given a choice," I said. "But yeah, I'm ready." I thought the worst was behind me, but I didn't realize. The second the story hit, Rick and Becca would lose control. And when that happened, they'd come looking for me. It went live at 7:02 a.m. Not a whisper, not a soft leak. A full-blown expose splashed across the front page of the National Ledger's online edition. The headline was surgical: Wexley Empire imploding, secret buyout, intern threats, and a son-in-law erased. Beneath it were audio files, transaction charts, timestamped screenshots, the entire paper trail Jillian and I had pulled together over the past 2 weeks. There was even a transcript of Becca's recorded conversation from the loft, verbatim. Within 20 minutes, #Wexley Fallout was trending. By noon, the board of Rick's company issued a public statement. By 1 o'clock, a corporate investigation had been launched. And by 2, I had 42 missed calls from unknown numbers. By dinner time, that number climbed to 70. I didn't answer a single one. I just sat in the public park across the shelter with my coffee, burnt, cheap, and somehow perfect, and watched the world I'd been exiled from crack like glass beneath the weight of its own lies. The 93rd call came just after midnight. It wasn't a known this time. It was her. "Curtis, please." Becca's voice was hushed, rushed, almost breathless. "Just pick up. I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's not helping anyone. You're ruining lives." I didn't pick up. I just listened to the voicemail 3 times in a row, watching the smoke from my breath curl into the night air. She called again. I answered. There was a beat of silence, like she didn't believe I'd done it. "Curtis." "Oh my God. Thank you." I didn't listen. I didn't know all of it. Damien lied to me. He said he was handling it clean, that you'd get a payout. that it wouldn't be like this. I almost laughed. A payout? Becca, I got a trifold pamphlet with a soup kitchen schedule on it. Okay, she said quickly. I know it was cruel. I admit that. But I was desperate. You don't understand the pressure I was under. My dad, he was going to cut me off if I didn't back his plan. Damien offered me freedom. I thought it was business, not this. You threatened an intern. I didn't threaten anyone. I have the recordings, Becca. You laughed. You called it a reset. You handed me a death sentence with good lighting and a reusable bag. There was a pause. A genuine one. Then quietly she said, they fired Rick this morning. My heart slowed. I know, I said. He's blaming me, she whispered. I'm getting death threats. The agency pulled every campaign with my name on it. Damien's gone silent. Curtis, you have to make it stop. The irony. The woman who orchestrated my erasure was now begging not to be invisible. The strategist had been outplayed by her own script. I didn't write the headlines, I told her. You did. Every move you made, every lie you told. This is your story, Becca. It's just finally being read out loud. She started crying. Or pretending to. I couldn't tell anymore. I used to know every shade of her emotion. Now it all felt like spray paint, loud, synthetic, and impossible to scrub clean. You can still fix this, she said. You still have a voice. You could say the article exaggerated things. You could call Jillian and do. I'm not saving you, I said calmly. I'm not saving anyone anymore. That was the old me. She went quiet. Then she snapped. You think you're some kind of martyr? You think this makes you noble? You destroyed everything. No, I said. I just stopped letting you speak for me. Then I hung up. No grand ending. No last word. Just silence. The kind of silence I hadn't heard since this all began. I lay down that night in the shelter cot. No pillow, one blanket, body sore from weeks of sleeping wrong. But my heart, it was still. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. Because the truth doesn't need armor when it's finally seen. And people like Becca? They built their lives on silence. But I made sure the world was listening. 3 weeks later, I walked into a job interview wearing a suit I bought for $40 from a secondhand store. The collar was a little too stiff, the shoes slightly mismatched in color, but I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like years, I stood taller, not because someone told me to, but because I finally wanted to. The startup was small. Ethical cybersecurity for nonprofits. No corporate gloss. No towering egos. Just real people doing honest work. I handed over my resume and braced for the awkward question. You were with Wexley Solutions? The hiring manager asked, eyebrows raised. I nodded. Until they weren't who they said they were. He smiled. You're the guy from the expose. I froze. That's not exactly what I owe. We loved it, he said, grinning. Took guts. We need people like that. I was hired 2 days later. They didn't care about my public meltdown. They didn't care about my time in the shelter. They cared that I stood up when everything in me wanted to disappear. I moved out of the shelter the next week. Keith, my brother, helped me load 2 bags and a box of books into his trunk and drove me to a tiny one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. I'd never been so proud of a rental agreement in my life. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Jillian's article won a regional journalism award a month later. She called to thank me, but I told her the thanks belonged to people like Lacey. People who spoke up when they could have stayed silent. She agreed, and then quietly mentioned she'd been approached to turn the story into a podcast. Will you let me use your real name? She asked. I thought about it for a long second. Then I said yes. Let them hear me now. As for Rick, his company was acquired, ironically, by a firm that valued ethics as part of its brand identity. He was last seen giving a carefully worded speech about transitioning to new ventures. His empire crumbled without a single fire lit. Becca? She tried to pivot. Posted long, dramatic videos online about healing and rebirth. But people didn't buy it. The public doesn't forget recordings. Eventually, she vanished from the headlines. Last I heard, she moved to Seattle. Maybe she'll reinvent herself. Maybe not. I don't think about her much anymore. Sometimes, I still carry that old brochure, the one she gave me the day she pushed me out of our home. I keep it folded in my wallet, not out of pain, but as a reminder that no matter how neatly someone plans your downfall, they can't script your rise. I'm not bitter. I'm grateful. Because I lost everything that didn't love me. And in return, I got my voice back. I'm Curtis. I was erased. But now, I'm writing my own ending. And this time, no one else holds the pen.